And then we heard there was a group from Liverpool.
Behind the glitter and glory of 70s rock, not everything was peace, love, and guitar solos. Behind the smiling album covers and wild performances, there was a world of egos, insults, and unspoken rivalries that shaped music history. These were bands that competed for fame, fans, and credibility, and often made it very clear how much they despised each other once the lights went out. Today, we're looking back at 7 legendary rivalries between 70s bands that secretly hated each other. Stories filled with sarcasm, jealousy, and the occasional act of sabotage disguised as coincidence. Get ready, rock might have brought people together, but it also tore some icons apart. Number 7. The Beatles versus the Rolling Stones.
Come together right now.
In the 60s and 70s, the world saw the Beatles and the Rolling Stones as two sides of the same coin. The clean-cut boys from Liverpool versus the wild rebels from London. But behind the scenes, the relationship was far more complicated. A mix of friendship, competition, and quiet resentment. It all started when the British press pushed the narrative that the Stones were the dirty answer to the Beatles. The image worked, but it created a rivalry that never really faded. Paul McCartney even helped Mick Jagger and Keith Richards write their first hit, I Wanna Be Your Man, a friendly gesture that later became a symbol of irony. While the Beatles explored new sounds and spiritual awakenings, the Stones leaned into chaos and rebellion, branding themselves as the real rockers. The rivalry grew sharper when Lennon and McCartney mocked the Stones in interviews, calling them followers who did what we did 2 months later. Mick Jagger fired back with sarcasm, once even mocking Lennon on stage during a show to roaring applause and silent Beatles disapproval.
Animals, there was no one like us. And then we heard there was a group from Liverpool.
Despite the tension, there was artistic respect, but the egos were massive. Every new album felt like a challenge thrown across Abbey Road or Chelsea. As Keith Richards once said, being friends with the Beatles was like competing with angels. You just couldn't win.
Number 6. Led Zeppelin versus The Who.
Hers is gold, and she's buying the stairway to heaven.
Behind the curtain of British rock, few ego clashes burned brighter than Led Zeppelin versus The Who. Two legendary bands, both larger than life, both determined to prove who truly defined the thunderous sound of the 70s. It started quietly. Before founding Led Zeppelin, Jimmy Page had recorded with members of The Who, and Pete Townshend respected him, until Zeppelin conquered the world. That's when pride got in the way. Townshend began taking shots at their music, calling it excessive, soulless, just loud for the sake of being loud. Page and Plant, ever the diplomats, didn't respond publicly, but their records did the talking. Fans and critics fueled the rivalry, constantly comparing who was louder, better, or more influential. When asked if he liked Led Zeppelin too, Pete once said, "It's powerful, but it feels like they're trying to be us without knowing why." Plant later admitted the comment stung, but also inspired him. Every time someone doubted us, we made a better album. At its core, it was a duel of visionaries, The Who protecting the roots of rock, while Zeppelin rewrote its future. And even though they respected each other's talent, that creative tension became rocket fuel for some of the greatest records of the decade.
Number 5. Pink Floyd versus the Rolling Stones.
A stranger in this town.
Amid the psychedelic haze and glittering chaos of the 70s, Pink Floyd and the Rolling Stones seemed to exist in opposite worlds, but their orbits collided hard. On one side, Floyd's cerebral, philosophical experimentation. On the other, the Stones' raw, hedonistic energy. The result? a quiet, stylish rivalry filled with disdain and razor-sharp jabs. It began when both bands were recording at the same London studios. Pink Floyd saw the Stones as stuck in the 60s, while Mick Jagger dismissed Floyd as music to fall asleep to. The tension grew as their fame exploded, and their interviews became battlegrounds of sarcasm. Roger Waters once declared that the Stones represented the decay of rock culture, an ego show pretending to be art. Jagger's response was slick and poisonous. At least people danced to ours. Despite the friction, it was almost poetic. While Floyd released deep conceptual masterpieces like Dark Side of the Moon, the Stones dropped swaggering anthems like It's Only Rock and Roll. Critics called them two halves of the same British coin, the brain and the body of rock. Behind the scenes, insiders claimed they avoided each other at events and tours. They respected one another, one sound engineer said, but they completely ignored each other. A cold war, where every new album was a challenge whispered across London. We are still the best.
Number 4. Eagles versus Fleetwood Mac. If there was an unspoken battle for the throne of 70s soft rock, it was fought between the Eagles and Fleetwood Mac, two bands that ruled the airwaves, sold millions of records, and hid a quiet, simmering disdain beneath the glitter of California's golden era. Both embodied the American dream of rock, success, heartbreak, and unimaginable wealth. But they also shared one dangerous thing in common: ego. And those egos clashed every time they crossed paths at award shows, parties, or studios. The Eagles saw Fleetwood Mac as too dramatic, like a soap opera with guitars, while Fleetwood Mac members mocked the Eagles as businessmen with instruments. During the recording of Hotel California and Rumors, their competition was so intense that even radio stations compared which band would release the album of the decade. Don Henley once claimed, "Fleetwood Mac writes songs about love. We write about truth." Christine McVie fired back years later, "They talk about truth, but lived like TV characters." The rivalry never exploded publicly, but backstage tension was thick enough to cut with a pick. Each band measured their success by the other. They sold that much? Then we'll sell double. In the end, both triumphed, but they never shared the same stage.
Number 3. Black Sabbath versus Deep Purple. In the underground world of 70s hard rock, two giants battled for the throne of heaviness, Black Sabbath and Deep Purple. And while fans liked to pretend there was mutual respect, behind the scenes, it was pride, ego, and thinly veiled hostility. Both bands emerged around the same time. Deep Purple came from a more progressive technical scene, while Black Sabbath forged a dark, doomy sound that felt almost ritualistic. The press loved the contrast and turned it into a rivalry that neither side could ignore. Deep Purple's Ritchie Blackmore once said, "Sabbath is heavy, sure, but not sophisticated. It's like a hammer. Loud, but it builds nothing." Sabbath's Tony Iommi quietly fired back, "We don't play for engineers. We play for people who feel the weight." They mostly avoided each other, but tension simmered whenever they shared a lineup or festival. Fans took sides, critics stoked the flames, and the debate over who was the true king of hard rock became endless. Years later, both bands would admit mutual respect, but back then, it was war. Deep Purple wanted to be known for mastery. Black Sabbath wanted to be known for power. And the fans got both, precision and darkness, locked in a thunderous duel for rock supremacy.
Number 2. Sex Pistols versus The Clash. By the late 70s, British punk had exploded, and with it came one of the most ideological and fiery rivalries in rock history: Sex Pistols versus The Clash. Both bands rose from the same London streets, the same dive bars, the same rebellion, but that's where the similarities ended. The Sex Pistols were pure chaos, loud, reckless, confrontational. They lived to offend. The Clash, on the other hand, had purpose. Their rebellion had structure. Their anger had ideas. They wanted punk to mean something beyond destruction. Johnny Rotten mocked the Clash as college punks, accusing them of turning rebellion into a brand. Joe Strummer fired back. The Pistols scream, but they say nothing. That exchange split fans, zines, and the entire punk scene. Backstage, it was a Cold War. There was respect, but no warmth. While the Sex Pistols burned everything with God Save the Queen, the Clash lit a political fire with White Riot. And when punk began to fade, each blamed the other. The Pistols claimed the Clash ruined it with preaching, while the Clash said the Pistols killed it with stupidity. Years later, Strummer summed it up perfectly. Without the Pistols, punk wouldn't exist, but with them, it couldn't survive. A rivalry that defined punk and ended it all at once.
Number 1. Aerosmith versus the Rolling Stones.
She was pretty from New York City. I'm walking down Meadow Valley, my angel.
In the 70s, the Rolling Stones were already living legends, and Aerosmith, the wild kids from America, were gunning for their crown. The problem? Mick Jagger and his crew didn't like being imitated one bit. From the start, the media dubbed Aerosmith the American Rolling Stones. Steven Tyler, all scarves, screams, and swagger, was constantly compared to Jagger, which he hated. He said, "We're not anyone's version, we're the future." The Stones, of course, saw that as pure arrogance. Things got heated as both bands chased the same spotlight: magazine covers, stadium tours, and screaming fans. Keith Richards once joked about Tyler, saying he's trying to be Jagger but looks more like a desperate bird. Tyler later shot back, "Better a bird flying than a wax statue staying still."
The rivalry peaked when Aerosmith began topping US charts, while critics accused the Stones of running on old fumes. Jagger, sharp as ever, warned that youth fades fast. But Tyler proved him wrong, still screaming and leaping across stages decades later. In the end, respect replaced rivalry. Both now admire each other openly, but back in the 70s, it was a clear showdown: the past versus the future, British royalty versus American rebellion. And as always, the stage decided who ruled rock. The 70s weren't just the golden age of rock, they were a battlefield. On stage, guitars screamed. Off stage, egos clashed. The Beatles and Stones fought for glory. Zeppelin and the Who battled for power. Pink Floyd and the Stones for artistic relevance. Fleetwood Mac and the Eagles for fame and heartbreak. And the rest, pure chaos. Sabbath and Deep Purple measuring heaviness. The Clash and Pistols trading ideals. Aerosmith taking aim at the Stones' throne. These rivalries didn't destroy rock, they defined it. They pushed every band to go harder, play louder, and leave a mark that would last forever. Maybe that's why we're still talking about them 50 years later, because conflict fuels greatness, and ego, when aimed right, makes legends. Now it's your turn. Which rivalry do you think was the wildest? And who really came out on top? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And if you love rock history, hit that like button and subscribe, because there are plenty more backstage stories on the way.
Just roll.